Hey everyone, welcome back to more Path of Exile, and today's kinda weird because this was supposed to be a video about a boomer using brands, but that wasn't really all that good in the end, and quite frankly I grew tired of it really fast. So I scrapped the Inquisitor Penance brand that I was doing and decided to use the currency gained from selling all the gear into Alberon's Warpath strength stacking shenanigans. And at first I wanted to do something with bows, but eventually decided for once. Now, with all honesty, the build that you're gonna see is far from being original. As you all know, this concept was popularized by your friendly neighborhood softcore streamer Matthew. However, these strength stacking builds are kinda popular in general right now, regardless of who made a build using the boots recently, so a lot of the gear tends to suffer from high demand prices. So yes, you guessed right, this is far from being cheap. And because of that, instead of making a full-blown guide for something that you probably already saw or knew about, I'm just gonna go quickly over the essentials of the character and move on to the build's performance. Spoilers though, it is really good, like dumb levels of good. Anywho, I'll leave my character's POV in the description if you wanna check out what I was doing with a bit more depth. And before we begin, as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, a thumbs up and a comment are always appreciated. And with all of that being said, let's talk about getting ripped while holding a magical stick that intoxicates everything that it comes in contact with. Alright, so let's start this shindig and I'll quickly go over the skill tree, but again, it is not really a build guide, more like a showcase. Anyways, let me just preface this with, you can build this any way you want, and you'll notice that people build this differently. Some like using dodge notes, like me, others say screw it and go pure armored. It is up to you and how comfortable you are with different defense mechanics. So yeah, the skill tree itself is all about maximizing strength, converting dexterity into strength, grabbing plenty of poison notes and grabbing some life here and there. Again, some people prioritize the strength before resistances in their gear and allocate some of those in the tree. I didn't go that route because my gear has the resists covered, but again, you can do that if you feel like doing it. For the ascendancy, poison, poison accessories, elusive and single target damage. We don't need power charges because Power Siphon generates those naturally, so it's kinda redundant to go that route. And finally, I just wanna point out that you can use a split personality with strength and accuracy, and it'll give a nice boost in DPS, but I wouldn't consider it mandatory unless you're able to hit 1500 without it. Though it's a nice option to have, but again, it's up to you and how much you want to invest into the character. So yeah, that's the skill tree. It's a bit complex, but it all makes sense in the end. So moving on to the gear, I'm just gonna drop the bomb immediately. Strength is the very first priority. Resistances are second, and any life you can cram into the gear is a bonus. Every single piece of gear needs strength, as much of it as you can either craft or afford. So with that in mind, the body armor, you wanna make sure that it's either Warlord or Elder influenced for that increased strength suffix, preferably tier 1 increased strength. If you can, slam together two armors together with increased strength and maybe exploding mod or increased life, up to you though. Another thing is the amulet, where some people like using Astra Mentis or others like me prefer a rare with some life and resists. It's up to you, but I personally prefer a rare amulet that I can benchcraft with mana cost. The rings, one of them has Despair on hit and the other one has as much life and resists as possible, and obviously strength is mandatory on both. However, we're also gonna craft reduced mana cost of skills on both of them, so keep that in mind. For the belt, increased strength is the synthesized base I recommend, and with essences try to cram as much life, resists and strength into it. The boots are the backbone of this entire character, so no much leeway on these ones, just try to get the highest roll as possible. On the helmet, you want Power Siphon projectiles as the enchantment and as much accuracy, life, strength and resists as possible. For the gloves, some people like damage with poison or chaos damage every time multiplier, alongside strength and resists or life. But in my case I went with Warlord gloves with resists, strength, damage over time which is a prefix, and I benchcrafted the life. The shield needs as much strength and resistances as possible. I went with a minimum frenzy, though I would have liked 2 minimum frenzies. They're kinda expensive, which is why mine isn't as good. If you can cram life into it, great, but again, not ultra mandatory. And finally the wand, which is something that you're gonna wanna craft because it needs to be an item level 83 wand with Elder Influence so that you can roll 60% chance for poisons inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage, which is absolutely mandatory. And if you can get chaos damage over time multiplier, damage with poison, flat damage over time multiplier, chaos damage added to attacks, all of that is great, otherwise some attack speed and crit chance are also kinda necessary. Finally, for skills, for clearing maps, some people like Kinetic Blast, but I personally do not like it, so I went with Power Siphon for both clear and single target, though some of the gameplay has me using Kinetic Blast. I did 2 Power Siphon setups, one on the gloves, which is the clear, and one on the body, which is the single target. And the important one is the single target because I've got Awakened Unbound Ailments, Vile Toxins, Awakened Deadly Elements, Barrage, and Awakened Void Manipulation linked to a level 21 and 20 quality Vaal Power Siphon. For auras, Malevolence, Skitterbots, and a low level Precision. You also want a spell totem setup with Wither, and at the same time Withering Step, Flame Dash, and both of them linked to Second Wind. You can also use Plague better than Valve Light. And again, I am going fast with all of this because it is not that much of a guide, so with all of that out of the way, let's get ready for a big fat conclusion. So let's talk about the important part of this video, which is the build itself, which again to no one's surprise is really freaking good. Most of the trash is getting one shot, one tapped if you will. The amount of chaos damage we deal alongside the poison deletes monsters immediately. Sure, some magic or rare monsters will survive a bit longer, but eventually the damage over time will catch up to them, allowing you to run past most of the dying monsters. When it comes to single target, it isn't as fast, but that's because you have to stack the poisons for the DPS to shine. This isn't like an attack or caster build where your 10 million DPS chunks bosses as soon as they become killable. No, this has some ramp up, which might throw you off at first, but once you get the hang of it, it shreds. However, as I mentioned previously, this isn't precisely cheap. Like, okay, the boots are super accessible, especially getting the max strength roll. It isn't expensive, but the boots alone aren't going to carry this build to serious or harder content. No, you still need your gear with as much strength as possible, a good wand, and the best gems you can afford. The real challenge begins once you start min-maxing every single slot. Getting to 1000 strength is not that difficult. Getting to 1500 strength is a bit harder but doable. Getting past that though, that's when the thing gets sketchy and budget stops meaning anything. Granted, 1500 should be more than enough, but we all like stacking those numbers, am I right? Now, if you're anything like me and you like using the obscure and niche stuff, you are gonna have a harder time. Like the minimum frenzy charges on the shield, open suffixes on the body armor to benchcraft increased attributes, not using Astromantis and instead using a rare amulet to craft life and resists into, etc. All of those alongside stacking strength, resistances, life, it becomes a bit of a challenge. It is a fun one, but if you're into min-maxing, it is gonna be a fun one. If you're not, then you're probably gonna suffer a little bit. But being totally honest, you probably don't need as many life mods on the gear, as strength is the important part, and by proxy strength gives you life, so at the end of the day, the larger the strength roll, the better. However, the challenge of stacking strength gets even more difficult once you realize that a good chunk of the community is playing with those boots. As I mentioned earlier, it's a popular build archetype. Sure, not everyone is just doing wands, some are going melee, others are doing bows, others are doing claw stuff, and unfortunately this means that the demand of gear for these kinds of builds is high, and by proxy, the crafting materials such as item bases, essences, and chaos or poison related fossils also tend to get expensive, especially if you intend to use multiple of them to fine-tune your weaponry and gear, and even further when things don't roll properly on the first couple of attempts. And at the end of the day, you're gonna have to rely on crafting some of the gear. Things like the body armor, the helmet, the belt, and the weapon are better off being crafted by yourself rather than trading for them, as the ones available on trade tend to get real expensive the more specific you get. And this is because in the end your gear needs are gonna be different from anyone else. The resists that you are lacking, the life you don't have, and the strength that you are pushing for may end up being different to what I did or what anyone else does. As I always mention with my builds, you don't really need to copy a build you saw to the last centimeter. You can compensate as you go, and in this case this means that you absolutely want to craft as many of the gear pieces you wear to fulfill those specific needs. For example, for all the intents of this build, one of the integral parts is the wand. Obviously wands do not roll strength on them, and essences of rage are kinda useless in wands, at least for this chaos stacker. So in the end, you wanna use an item level 83 wand with Elder Influence and spam a combination of aberrant, corroded and serrated fossils to get something like the wand I showcased, because it is mandatory to hit that 60% chance for poisons with the weapon to deal 100% more damage. It is a huge DPS increase and integral to dealing as much damage over time as possible. However, there is also another caveat, in the form of intelligence, because you see I am not using Astra Mentis, and because of that my character is intelligence starved, and due to this I cannot use higher tier ones as I do not have enough intelligence, and I am forced to use less optimal bases. Mine is pretty good, but with all honesty I'd prefer an imbued wand, you know, for the attack speed and stuff. But I also knew this from the beginning because I voluntarily chose not to use Astra Mentis, so that one caveat was self-inflicted. It's up to you though in the end, either an amulet with life and resists alongside plenty of strength or an Astra Mentis. And at the end of the day, the Astra Mentis is going to be the cheaper option, since most rare amulets with at least 100 strength before quality alongside some life and resists are gonna be expensive. But yeah, to wrap up this showcase, as you are seeing from the gameplay, it is a ton of fun. Like, the only drawback I see is that there is no corpse exploding, so you are vulnerable to undeath crap like fucking porcupines. But sure, you could slam the exploding mod into an increased strength body armor with an Awakener's Orb, but I feel like you still need resists or life, and that is a gamble that may not be that much worth it in the end. So just to actually conclude the build, it is fun, it is powerful, there's plenty of room for constant min-maxing and improvement, but it gets expensive really freaking fast. Though if you are skilled, you probably don't need a billion DPS, so having less optimal gear is equally as doable. Do I recommend giving it a shot? Yes. And that is because the boots are either gonna get nuked or removed come next league, so you might as well jump in the Replica Alberon's hype train right now, or miss out on flat, chaotic, toxic, venomous fun, or something like that. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I know that this is a different video than usual, and it's mostly due to me not achieving greatness with the brand Inquisitor, so I had to compensate, and I wanted to give this a shot, so in the end it's a win-win scenario. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next video. Have a nice week, take care, and peace out.